Warning, this video contains themes of religion and vivid depictions of loss of life. Viewer discretion is advised. On October 9th, 1859, a woman named Sister Adele Bryce of Robinsonville, Wisconsin, was walking home from Mass in Bay Settlement with her sister and another woman. Adele Bryce had seen two premonitions of the Virgin Mary between a hemlock and sugar maple tree on the same road the three women were walking down. As Adele Bryce looked towards the sugar maple and hemlock tree, the same woman appeared for the third time. Overwhelmed, Bryce fell to her knees and asked the woman, "In God's name, who are you and what do you want of me?" The lady in white replied, "I am the Queen of Heaven who prays for the conversion of sinners, and I wish you to do the same. You received Holy Communion this morning, and that is well, but you must do more. Make a general confession and offer communion for the conversion of sinners. If they do not convert and do penance, my son will be obliged to punish them." Whether by coincidence or truly a divine proclamation, 12 years later, nearly to the date, on October 8th, 1871, the deadliest wildfire in U.S. history would ravage the exact same area and become one of the most horrific natural disasters ever documented in history. This is the story of the Great Peshtigo, Wisconsin Fire of October 8th, 1871. An incredibly industrious lumber town located off the shore of Green Bay in the Peshtigo River, the small town of Peshtigo, Wisconsin was developing into an economic powerhouse since its first sawmill was built in 1838. Once home to the largest woodenware factory in the world, as well as one of the largest sawmills in the United States, Peshtigo's economy was heavily centered around its plentiful and abundant tree canopy. Many European immigrant farmers flocked to the area, seeking job opportunities in the lumber industry to save up money to purchase plots of land to convert into farmland. With many thick trees flourishing the landscape, the forests were removed to develop agriculture and further the prosperous logging industry. The foliage was cut to the ground, placed in piles, and then burned to clear and develop farmland, a method called slash and burn agriculture. However, Peshtigo, as well as most of the upper Midwestern United States, had been experiencing an oppressive, unending drought lasting since winter all the way through summer and into fall of 1871. This practice of burning dry, fallen trees and shrubs was incredibly risky, as little to no rainfall had fallen for a very long time. Yet the drought didn't stop the settlers from continuing to burn dry brush and foliage in extremely dry conditions. These fires were so persistent that the skies were obscured in smoke so thick that ships on Green Bay constantly sounded their foghorns to prevent collision with one another. Lanterns were even lit during the daytime because the smoke obscured most of the sunlight, and consequently many people got sick from all the smoke inhalation. Many small forest fires broke out weeks before October 8th west of Peshtigo and north in Marinette, to little or no concern despite the continuous drought. The heaps of burning brush were often left to burn for long periods of time, sometimes even making their way underground, burning up the roots of trees which would topple them over and occasionally burst into flames. Yet some settlers, while a very hard-working class of blue-collar men, didn't pay much mind to the danger and could also be quite an unruly bunch. As Peshtigo was developing, many bars and brothels were built, becoming very popular places for settlers to spend time. Lawlessness in some cases prevailed, with many enjoying gambling, drinking, and often picking fights with one another. 12 years had now passed since Sister Adele's premonition of the Virgin Mary's warning for all sinners to repent. And yet all caution over a decade later, whether of participating in debaucherous acts or even putting out brush fires billowing all around Peshtigo, seemed to have been thrown to the wind for good. But this time, a low-pressure system had been working its way east, bringing a massive cold front with gale-force winds into the upper Midwest. Even though this system would bring desperately needed rain to Peshtigo soon, the small town, with every single building, bridge, and road made of dry wood, would have to burn in hell first before a single drop of rain could be exchanged, paying a gruesome price like one paid by Sodom and Gomorrah in the book of Genesis. About 36 miles southwest of Peshtigo, what is thought to have been a brush fire from railroad workers developing railroad tracks began to break out of control on Sunday evening. It would not be long before the bone-dry landscape would ignite into a swarming conflagration, congealing smaller brush fires into a massive inferno propelled by intense wind gusts. In no time, northeast Wisconsin erupts into flames, and the sprawling fires engulf the kindling landscape. Peshtigo, unaware of the incoming hellfire to their west, remained in their homes after evening church services had ceased early due to the oppressive smoke plaguing the air. But around 8:30 p.m., a red glow begins to manifest above the forest in the nighttime skies, growing progressively ominous as the incoming roar of the massive conflagration begins its rampage of Peshtigo. Within an instant, flames rupturing inside the consummated forest caused an explosive fireball, launching fire straight outwards and raining hell down from the skies. Many people fall into a mass panic, running away from their houses, attempting to flee the flames. Thick smoke and dust made escaping nearly impossible, leading many to be consumed by fire, as well as the suffocating air and heat of the flames robbing oxygen and scarring lungs. Screams of the turmoil and visceral agony of people burning alive were smothered into obscurity by the roars of the inferno. The winds moved fires at blistering speeds of over 100 miles per hour. The air temperatures heated by the fires were estimated to be between 260 to 1100 degrees Celsius, or 500 to 2000 degrees Fahrenheit, rivaling the heat of pyroclastic flows from volcanoes. The cold front driving the inferno with 110-mile-per-hour winds caused hot air to updraft, with winds rapidly changing direction, converging into a massive rotating column, which became the infamous fire tornado of the Peshtigo fire. Every ounce of air was replaced by swirling, inescapable hellfire. The Peshtigo River became a haven for the frantic townsfolk to take cover, where hundreds of people jumped into the freezing waters to prevent burning alive. Yet many of these people would not survive, as many drowned in the waters from exhaustion or froze to death from hypothermia. As the fires crossed the Peshtigo River, some would be lit on fire by falling debris landing on top of them. Those who sought cover in wells would also not survive, as the water inside would be superheated like a cauldron, boiling the victims alive. Most unfortunate were those caught in the fires without access to water for protection, such as the rural forests fueling the fires and igniting like a giant box of matches. Some even found themselves in the middle of empty fields, completely surrounded by fire with nowhere to escape, ultimately succumbing to an indescribably agonizing death. This inferno would persist until the early morning hours of October 9th, where the falling temperatures, lack of fuel, and eventual rainfall would extinguish the last burning coals of the Peshtigo fire. In hours, 2,000 people burned in hell on earth before perishing. About 1.5 million acres of forest in northern Wisconsin and Michigan were scalded into ash. Only 2 structures in Peshtigo somehow remained standing: a brick kiln and a home composed of moist, newer timber. The heat of the flames was so intense, it melted a church bell like a candle and turned any sand on the ground into sheets of glass. Winds from the rotating firestorm even tossed around railroad cars like toys. Some initially thought that these same winds propelled the fire to cross over Green Bay, burning areas to its east in Kewaunee and Door County. But this was actually a separate fire, since the fire south of the bay began before the Peshtigo fire, and the wind direction would not have allowed the fires to cross over the water either. Telegraph lines were torched, and no word could be relayed to spread the news of the Peshtigo fire, which wouldn't have been made aware to Lucius Fairchild, governor of Wisconsin, until October 10th, who was en route to assist the devastation of the Chicago fire, which occurred on the exact same day as the Peshtigo fire. Yet worst of all were the folks of Peshtigo, as many who survived were scalded by the fires, unable to breathe from inhaling smoke and coughing profusely, as well as many blinded from the flames, dust, and smoke, and freezing from hypothermia. Many cried out looking for lost family members, but many of these cries would unfortunately go unheard. At least 800 people were found dead in Peshtigo alone, including over 300 people who were burnt beyond recognition and buried in a mass grave site, as well as numerous dead or dying inside the Peshtigo River. Some instances of loss from this fire are among the most heart-wrenching and disturbing cases ever recorded amongst natural disasters. A man named Carl Lamp attempted to escape the inferno with his wife and children with their horse-drawn carriage. However, their chance to flee the fires was thwarted as their carriage would lose a wheel, and soon the fires incinerated Lamp's horse. He turns away in the opposite direction for a moment, only to look back and see the flames consume the carriage with his wife and children still inside. An unknown man was also reported to have sacrificed his own children to spare them from burning alive in hellfire by slitting their throats open. By some strange coincidence, or even some divine omen, a Bible recovered from the Peshtigo fire many years later was found with its pages open to Psalms chapter 106. Verses 9 through 18 seem as though they were an ominous premonition to the incoming fury unleashed in Peshtigo. God rebuked the Red Sea, and it dried up. He led them through the depths as through a desert. He saved them from the hand of the foe. From the hand of the enemy he redeemed them. The waters covered their adversaries. Not one of them survived. Then they believed his promises and sang his praise. But they soon forgot what he had done and did not wait for his plan to unfold. In the desert they gave into their craving. In the wilderness they put God to the test. So he gave them what they asked for, but sent a wasting disease among them. In the camp, they grew envious of Moses and of Aaron, who was consecrated to the Lord. The earth opened up and swallowed Dathan. It buried the company of Abiram. Fire blazed among their followers. A flame consumed the wicked. The Peshtigo fire would become the deadliest wildfire to ever occur in U.S. history, one of the top 15 deadliest U.S. natural disasters, and even some sources claim was the deadliest wildfire in recorded world history. Peshtigo would never return to its prosperous origin after the fires broke out. The entire lumber industry went up in flames, as almost every tree supplanting the lumber mills and woodenware buildings would be burnt to ash, including the businesses themselves. This fire was so significant and so horrific that even the U.S. military during World War II studied the Peshtigo fire in order to recreate a similar effect in combat. developing incendiary bombs to create continuously burning infernos that would be inflicted upon the city of Hamburg, Germany, known as Operation Gomorrah, a reference to the namesake city that God destroyed with merciless raining fires in the Bible. Like the aforementioned Bible verses from the Book of Psalms, the Great Fires of 1871 across the upper Midwest would reminisce scenes from the Book of Revelation. Even some extraterrestrial intervention was thought to be a potential cause for the Great Fires, including Peshtigo. Biela 2, a comet which had flown over the upper Midwest before the fires, was thought by speculative scientist and filmmaker Melvin Waskin as the cause of these infernos. This was to explain how each major fire occurred at very similar times in very different places, as well as to dispel Catherine O'Leary and her cow as the Chicago fire's culprits. Pieces of the comet were speculated to have fallen from the sky and ignited the dry foliage and wood into a massive blaze. Many witnesses reported seeing bright and shining fireballs descending from the skies in Michigan, Chicago, and Peshtigo. This led to believe the possibility of celestial debris igniting the fires. However, this theory wouldn't be in favor among scientists studying the event, as many of these pieces of debris would be too small, cooled off in temperature, or even disintegrated in the Earth's atmosphere of setting off the fires. Considering the unending drought, small brush fires already occurring, and the incoming cold fronts blowing gale-force winds, this would likely remain the cause of the 1871 Great Fires. But the most incredible case of what may have been considered to be some as pure divine intervention is that on October 8, 1871, where Sister Adele had been at the chapel in Robinsonville with her companions, taking shelter from the invading fires pummeling towards them like a tornado. Many people struck with terror from the surrounding area rushed towards the chapel in seek of cover from the fires, under the belief that the end of the world was happening. Inside, they joined Sister Adele in a walking procession around the chapel by praying, singing hymns, and carrying a statue of Mary. As the morning arrived, rain finally dropped from the skies like a gift from the heavens, extinguishing the fires. Every single person inside the chapel survived, and incredibly, the chapel, as well as the school and convent located on the 5-acre property it resided on, were unscathed, with light burn marks present, as the rest of the surrounding area was utterly charred and burnt to ash. Father Peter Pernin, a priest from Peshtigo who sought asylum in the Peshtigo River for 5 hours and survived the fires, visited the chapel grounds. Astonished, Pernin stated, "After hours of horror and suspense, the heavens sent relief in the form of a downpour. The fervent prayers to the Mother of God were heard. The fire was extinguished, but dawn revealed the ravages wrought by the conflagration. Everything about them was destroyed, miles of desolation everywhere. But the convent, school, and chapel on the Holy Land consecrated to the Virgin Mary shone like an emerald isle in a sea of ashes." These chapel grounds, a shrine to Mother Mary, gained many visitors pilgriming to Champion. Sister Adele's apparition of Mary would become the first and currently only official Marian apparition in the United States, approved by the Catholic Church. The grounds would be designated as a national shrine by the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops on August 15, 2016, as well as some years being visited by over 100,000 people. The loss of life has not been matched of these wildfires in the United States afterwards. Fire Prevention Week, which begins on October 9th each year in the United States and Canada, began in the early 1920s and was dedicated to commemorate the atrocities of the Chicago fire, which burned on the same day Peshtigo was conflagrated. Although the Chicago fire gained much more notoriety and infamy thanks to being a bigger city, this fire wouldn't even come close to the absolutely horrific loss of life in Peshtigo. While the mystery of the Chicago fire's cause continues to boggle many curious minds today, Sister Adele Bryce's premonition 12 years prior to the Peshtigo fire is one of the most terrifyingly bizarre and mystical aspects of the Great Fires of 1871. Whether Bryce's encounter with the Virgin Mary is to be a relevant aspect of the fire or not, depending on one's own belief or skepticism, the necessity for fire prevention would become a revelation of great importance for saving lives as well as preserving infrastructure and habitats. The Peshtigo fire remains today as the deadliest wildfire in recorded history, and hopefully the loss of life is never surpassed by another atrocious fire in the future, although this possibility can't be completely ruled out. The incredible fury unleashed by the Peshtigo fire is among one of the most important natural disasters in history to be studied, and remains as one of the most harrowing and terrifying chapters experienced in Wisconsin state history. Thank you all for watching. Please like and share this video, as well as leave a comment below. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel, WorldStorm.